Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the ALN Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Asset Leadership Network web discussion program. And it's a really different discussion program this time. We've got our first chief evangelist. Nicholas Johnson is joining us from Kahua. And we consider ourselves an evangelical organization that cheers for the use of asset management. And with him is his colleague, Shane Pedersen from Aprio. But we'll get to them later. We'd like to start by thanking all of our supporters, the ALN patron members of Jacob, Mantech, CGI, Onuma, and all of our organizational members, especially Kahua this week. Very happy to be having Kahua lead this discussion about the important DoD CMMC program dealing with data as an asset. And but before we get started with them, want to talk about upcoming programs, which includes our first book club event, and we're going to have a preview of the book club on the 25th. Next week on ALN Thursday at 3, we have the executive director of the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, which is now a foundation because the Linux Foundation has acquired them, and they've got a code and procedures for allowing owners to have all their assets talk to each other, talk to the internet, and then talk to the grid so we can actually start the smart grid that we all know we need. And the Asset Leadership Network was mentioned in the Linux Foundation announcement last week, and we gave Rick some time to calm down. It was very exciting and active week at the ASHRAE event in Orlando. And then also, Nicholas, why don't you come on and let's talk about another upcoming event that you're going to be involved in before we get into the CMMC discussion. How you doing, Nicholas?
Good, Mike. Thank you. And I appreciate the introduction and the kind words. And yes, we're excited that 1 month from today, we'll be back on to speak about a new methodology in project management called asset-centric project management. It is all about collecting that critical asset data that owner operators need when they start up their facility, their utility, whatever it is that they've acquired in a design and construction project. We've developed a method to do that automatically and instantly every phase along the design and construction path, so that when you acquire a new asset, be it a factory, a building, a hospital, a utility, you have all the operational data you need from the moment you acquire that. So we're very excited to come back and talk about that next month.
Okay, and so this is still just the preview part of the presentation. So now we're getting into the discussion about, tell us a little bit about what Kahua does. Would like to get just the overview.
So Kahua is a project management information system. So from this point forward, I'll refer to that as a PMIS. It's all the data and documents that are collected along the way when we plan, design, procure, construct, commission a project. So you folks in the Asset Leadership Network, and I should not say you folks because we're part of that now, we're a member organization now. In the Asset Leadership Network, we are concerned about the operations side, the assets we acquire. My entire career, Kahua's life really is built around the project side. That happens before we acquire the asset. We build project management software to help our customers really improve efficiency and gain control over the things they need. So it is the most secure platform in the world. It is probably the most modern platform in the world. So we're very proud of our product, of course. But we've done something in the past 2 years that has brought us into the ALN, and that is develop this methodology called asset-centric. So we're a project management tool, but we now operate with the eye of an owner. We do a project, we perform a project with the asset in mind, and we've kind of made the asset the center of our universe. all the information that we collect during planning, design, and so forth, we tag to an asset. The asset kind of becomes its own container. Therefore, again, as we are progressing this project, our project management software is capturing all this critical asset information to do the things that you just described with the Internet of Things, to be able to have all that information in a way that's usable, that's connected to other applications and connected to whatever other information system you need it to be. So at our
Yeah.
core, we're project management folks. We're project management folks that now see things through the eye of an owner.
So that is what we are evangelical about. Projects end, asset management is for the entire life cycle. And we need the world to follow Kahua's evolution.
We're pushing hard for that, Mike. I think the one thing that I say, I'm invited to speak at a lot of conferences. I'm not invited to pitch my product, as you wouldn't expect me to be. So what I tell the audiences that I get to speak with is that they should demand this of their provider, whoever their provider is. If they can't do this, demand that they create it, because we have for 30 years been turning over data in the form of a disk or now a thumb drive. And Mike, perhaps you can validate this from your own experience and that of the other leaders in the Asset Leadership Network, that at the turnover of a project, you're given a thumb drive with 55,000 PDFs and 100 spreadsheets, and your team throws that in a drawer somewhere and then pays an exorbitant amount to create your own database.
We hear that over and over again. And so it's so great that Kahua is a member and is sharing that evolution and advocating that others do that.
That's a great word, Mike, evolution, because Kahua is founded by a couple of guys who founded a company in the 90s. The company was called Constructware, and it was the very first project management system that went to the internet. Now, you might imagine what that transition was like, to go to a contractor base to say, hey, general contractor, you should put all your drawings on the internet and all your documents and collaborate with people live. And they looked at us like we had two heads.
Yeah.
But the idea was so good, so powerful, that very soon everyone was using it. And now you couldn't imagine doing a design or construction project without internet capability.
Well,
it was
unfortunately, a lot of people still do.
This evolution comes from there, because when we went digital, we took our documentation and our data digital, and we didn't have a really good way to turn it over to owners who were already at that time using really good CMMS and CAFM tools. So it's a problem we helped create. Now we've solved it.
And that's a perfect lead in to why the CMMC is so important, because now the information is on the internet, and it's other, it's more, but that's the perfect transition to that. So you and Shane have worked together. So I'll let you introduce Shane and bring him on.
Happy to do that. I'm going to first just answer the first question. Why is CMMC important? It's a regulation that's gone into effect, and I should define. CMMC is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program. It's a program that requires contractors, their subcontractors, their suppliers to achieve a certain level of security in dealing with controlled, unclassified information, sensitive documentation, if you will. It's a requirement that went into effect December 16th of 24. It is rolling out progressively this month in how that's being enforced. So I'll let
This year.
This year. So it is currently in effect. It is a phased implementation. So this first 6-month period, there's a little bit of, you can raise your hand and promise that you're being secure. But that will change as these regulations again begin to clamp down. Why is it important? Because I'll tell you that off the record, in September, I heard a naval procurement officer, a high-ranking Navy officer, say publicly that, but in a please don't repeat this way, they're concerned that they're going to lose 30 to 50% of their contractor base when these requirements fully roll out at the end of this year. What does it mean if you lose 30 to 50% of your eligible contractors? it means projects don't get done, and those that do get done cost twice as much. So Shane is with Aprio. Shane, I'll let you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and about Aprio, but I've said why CMMC is important. I want you to tell us more about really what it is and how it came about. So
Sure.
Shane?
Yeah. So Shane Peden, and I lead a few different service lines within Apria, but one of them is called Managed Security Compliance Services, and we specialize in helping companies deal with a variety of security compliance requirements like CMMC. Aprio as a whole is a large professional services firm that does everything from tax and financial audits and a lot of different things. So I work within a team in Aprio that does security services. And we're also a C3 PAO organization. So we help companies get ready for CMMC, but we also help companies get certified with CMMC.
Shane, I'm going to interrupt you just quickly. We're the worst in the world in construction about using acronyms. So C3PAO.
You know, off the top of my head, I forget what it stands for.
It's the third-party auditor, effectively,
Yes,
right?
yes, that is right.
You've got an accountant to do one thing in your financials, and you've got somebody to audit that. It's the same in this security implementation.
Yeah.
You've got a consultant to help you set these guidelines up, and then you've got somebody else to make sure, a different party, a third party, to make sure that they were done right.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why that matters, because that's more important than what the acronym stands for. It matters to realize that not just anybody can go out and do these certifications. Unfortunately, this thing has been long time coming, but a lot of companies have either put it off or frankly been skeptical it would ever get here because it's been so long in the making,
right?
That there is a shortage of assessors. So if you did find out that you need a certification, it would be better to engage an assessment firm sooner rather than later and ask them, hey, how far out is your queue for getting a certification done? That is really important right now. I don't remember how many assessors there are, but I think it's in the hundreds. And you mentioned how many contractors there are in the defense industrial base. So there's not enough of us to go around to do the certs either.
Right. Probably 100,000
Yeah.
subcontractors just in the DoD side. That doesn't include all the other federal work. So
yeah. So where did you want to start with our conversation about CMMC? Because there's a lot of avenues that I guess we could go.
Well, tell us just briefly, whose creation is this? Whose program is this? And why do you think they put it in place?
The Department of Defense developed CMMC. It's not a law per se. It is it's a regulation that is part of the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council. And it was put in place because of major shortcomings in cybersecurity amongst government agencies, their vendors, their suppliers. Unfortunately, cybersecurity weaknesses are they're a major risk to every nation state, and cyber warfare is a fact of life that is happening 24/7.
And we found that almost every major leak that's come both corporately and governmentally in the US has not come from the agency itself, the company itself, but from some contractor or subcontractor that worked for them. That's how most hacks are happening, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the issues lie with the companies supplying the government or even those companies' suppliers. So that's a great point to bring up. One thing to remember about CMMC is that it flows down. And I'll give you a really interesting example. I believe our company Aprio helped a company prepare for CMMC that just provided components to somebody that was part of a construction operation building for the Navy. So imagine that you build a widget for the Navy and you are part of the supply chain and all you produce is a bolt. If you receive certain information as part of that contract, you may end up needing to be CMMC compliant, even if you're like, all I do is produce bolts. It's not really about what you're producing, it's about the information you come in contact with.
So that bolt might be to go on a machine that goes on a submarine. So the bolt manufacturer receives some drawings about that machine and perhaps the placement in the submarine. That makes that information, if not classified, controlled, unclassified information.
Exactly. And then the next logical question I always get asked in the sales process is, how do I know if that matters?
So Shane, how do you know if that matters?
So the way that CMMC is enforced is through contracts. And you're going to see gradually, I don't know how they decide what contracts suddenly have CMMC requirements included, but you're going to see the contracts start to have it as provisions.
So that naval officer was concerned that his procurement officers will enforce CMMC. They will require it of their supply chain, and there will not be enough supply chain to accommodate it. Because the RFP, the procurement solicitation, is going to requirement. So I won't be able to bid on this work. Exactly. I won't be able to bid on these projects if I don't have this certification.
Exactly. Yeah. So you'd have to have the certification to be qualified to bid. But that certification is supposed to flow down also to your subservice organizations. And I just talked to a small construction firm yesterday about this, and we got to talking about, well, who do you do business with? And she mentioned, I do business with Kahua. I use Microsoft 365. I'm like, that's great. Both FedRAMP compliant, which gets you cleared for CMMC. And then she mentioned, oh, and I have this IT shop that does all my IT help desk and computer provisioning and other. And I go, unfortunately, they'll be pulled into scope. They'll have to be CMMC compliant. And she's like, that's terrible. How are they going to do that? And it's a reality that it would need to flow through.
If a general contractor wants to bid on building a new barracks at a base or any building at a base, they'll have to have this certification. Their subcontractors will have to have it, and the suppliers that the subcontractors buy from may have to have it.
Yeah.
Okay, we see how it works now. So again, then the question comes back to you. How do I know this? Well, you've answered, I know that I have to have it if the bid document requires it. So the wise contractor now is getting prepared for this.
Yeah.
Once we've determined that, and I've got my status, then what is the the controlled, unclassified information that we talk about? Can you give us some examples of what that might be? And again, how do I know this in that procurement cycle when I'm bidding on a project? Do I know what that's going to be?
You should. But when I've spoken to multiple prospects and current clients, one thing that comes up is that it's vague. So the challenges I've heard so far is CUI is what they call it. CUI isn't defined in the agreement. What is it? And then they'll say the documents are not clearly marked of what is and is not CUI that they're giving us.
Mike, come in here, Mike. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah.
Well, the CUI, I'm thinking I'm not familiar with that. So
that's the CUI term I used before.
Yeah.
Controlled, unclassified information.
All right, I was doing something else, but I'm gonna write that in here now. Controlled.
Mike, no, that's really good though. As I said, we are terrible about throwing acronyms around. And if you're not a project person, if you're not a construction design person, if you're not a security person, you're not going to be familiar with these. So thank you for stopping us there. So again, some examples, and we are here, of course, at the Asset Leadership Network. So what are some examples, perhaps, of asset data, the things that that this network of folks manages after a project's over? Can you think of some things that might be sensitive information that we would want to control?
Yeah, at a high level, what would probably matter most to people within your world would be proprietary business information that's proprietary to the DoD, to the agency that you're working with. It might be technical documentation. blueprints, schematics, anything like that, CAD files, blueprint. Yeah, I said blueprints. It could be specifications for how software works. It's very wide ranging based on the nature of the project being done.
And then let me expand on that question. So
Please.
Nicholas did a great job of showing the contractor and subcontractors need the certification. What if I'm providing furniture? What if I'm providing personal property,
I,
computers, IT, other things?
I cannot definitively answer those questions. It would have to be defined in the agreement of whether or not they care about it. Because I might say, hey, why would they care about the types of chairs that go in an office? And maybe you say, well, that's benign, that doesn't matter. But then on the computer side, you say, well, if you know what type of computer and operating system being used, is that not a sensitive piece of information that could be leveraged by a nation state to
Yeah,
attack?
the furniture providers might be getting plans to say, what layout do you need in this?
That's true.
Yeah, so
Yeah, that's true.
it's about the information that you're getting, not necessarily about,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
That's exactly where I was going to go, Mike. If I'm supplying furniture, at some point you've given me floor plans.
yeah. So you can see why all of this does matter. And what we would do if CUI or controlled unclassified information is not defined, we try to work with them to compel them to define it. But we do a risk assessment and say, well, let's make a risk assessment, informed, educated guess that probably matters, and we should probably do the right thing and protect it, because eventually, maybe next year, they do define that. And it would be better to be prepared and already have the processes in place to deal with it than have to go back again and deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, let's bring it back to the assets. Kahua is very interested in this topic because it brings together two topics that we think are very important. They're certainly important to us, and that would be the security of information and of asset data. To be clear, again, we're a design and construction project management information system. We're the first full-featured PMIS, project management information system, to obtain FedRAMP authorization. FedRAMP is the gold standard of cybersecurity for cloud service providers. And Kahua is the first and only PMIS that's developed a methodology for capturing all the critical asset data that owner operators need we capture this during the processes of design, construction, and so forth. And we'll be discussing all that again a month from now, this methodology we've created. So everybody, please mark your calendars for March the 20th, when we'll join Thursday at 3 again and talk about asset-centric project management as a methodology. But Mike, I want to bring it back again, though. Security and asset data together, that's why we're here talking about CMMC. So you're not a security expert, but can you give us some more examples of the kind of asset data that an owner might want to keep more secure?
So Jim Dieter, our CEO, has thrown in the chat that it's everything from furniture to the Mars rover and all the IT assets and everything in between. But when I asked the furniture question, it was about like the floor plan for a control center for the Coast Guard regional district. We're dealing with something that's really important these days, and it ties to what I mentioned earlier about that Internet of Things ability that the Linux Foundation is going to start bringing. The damper on your HVAC system. And it can close down if there's smoke or if there's a poisonous gas. But if you're a bad agent, you can if you have that information, you can open that damper. And that is not good. So we want those things to be secure.
I will tell you, we use this methodology, asset-centric project management. We use the methodology for all kinds of owners, from one of the largest utility companies in North America, what I would call a very asset-intensive owner. If you think about most utilities, most refineries, for example, it's a shell of a building, and a bajillion parts and assets. Okay. If you think about an elementary school, it's a pretty simple construction with a few systems in place. So they're a very they're not intensive in asset. They're, a very sparse asset owner, but they need to track their boilers and their cooling towers and their chillers and air handlers and so forth. So there are different levels of intensity of the kind of assets that owners are going to want to track and maintain and operate. But we learned in walking into, because we are doing this process now with educational owners and with utility companies and everybody in between, hospitals and commercial operators. We learned, though, you made me think of this, Mike. We learned that with schools, one of the new asset categories that is very critical to them are all the security devices that they now have in place. Okay, schools have been shut down because hackers have violated those systems and actually locked the doors on an entire school system. This happened several years ago in Texas when week after week, school systems were being held ransom for payments so that their data would be released. One of those hackers actually locked the doors of several schools, forcing the entire system to shut down for a week before they could start school that year. So again, a good example of an asset whose data is critical and should be controlled. Shane, I want to bring it back to you. This is, of course, the Asset Leadership Network, a group for people that own and operate and manage and maintain assets. I come from the world of design and construction. We turn things over and we don't think about operations. But we create our assets. We create assets on behalf of these ALN members. So I understand CMMC as it applies to the contractor world and their subs and the supply chain. Does this apply to the owner who's going to take over these assets at the end of a project?
Yeah, I mean, CMMC would apply to anybody that's contracting with the DoD. And soon, over the next couple of years, it may even expand beyond that. Back in January, just last month, there was talks about applying this role to different agencies of the government beyond the defense industrial base. So I think it's just going to be a fact of life over the next maybe half decade.
And then from the DoD perspective, what this does is give assurance that they can operate safely. And we've always got to stay ahead of the bad guys. They've got access to these tools just like we do. And this is a way to give the DoD the secure understanding that what they're doing is achieving their mission. And as technology evolves, that's more and more important. So Nicholas, can you tell us how working with Kahua helps organizations achieve CMMC?
Yeah, and then I'll ask Shane to follow up on this because he is the expert here. But as I mentioned earlier, Kahua achieved the highest level of cloud computing security, the FedRAMP authorization, gold standard for cloud service providers. What's built into the FedRAMP certification or authorization that we have are mostly the same controls that CMMC requires. Certainly there is an incredible overlap between 2/3 and 3/4 or maybe 4/5 of these regulations are identical. So if you are using a tool to manage your information, if you're using a project tool like Kahua that is FedRAMP authorized, you inherit that high overlap of controls. So using our tool gives you a great big head start on trying to meet the many requirements of CMMC. We think it gets you about 3/4 of the way there, but that's just in number of requirements. Don't take that as we're going to shave 75% of your cost off. But we do think it's a big scope reduction in the effort you have to go through to achieve CMMC. And now that's my take as a non-technical solution provider. Shane, what's your thought on FedRAMP for CMMC?
But before Shane, you start, this is so exciting. I don't want it to end at the half hour. We do know that some of our attendees have to move on to other things. But if you're both willing to go into overtime, there's
Sure.
so much more to say. So go ahead, Shane.
Yeah. So Nicholas brought up a really important point. Anybody within the scope of your environment, and I'll add that too. When you go to comply with these different standards, and it goes beyond CMMC, but also FedRAMP or any of the others that are more industry focused, not government focused. You usually scope the system that you need to get certified. So in approaching CMMC compliance, you'd work with somebody like me to help you strategically scope and develop a program and limit your costs and your efforts to maintain and get certified. Kahua is a really important part of that, and other solutions that also have that FedRAMP certification, because you can't have anybody in that scope that isn't certified, either CMMC certified or FedRAMP certified. So you're going to have to go find solutions across the board that meet these requirements. And I'll give you guys a great example. We have one client getting ready for CMMC and realized that their password management solution was not compliant. It can't be in the environment unless it's compliant. So they would either have to compel that solution to go get FedRAMP certified so that they could participate in the environment, or they'd have to go find another vendor. That's a huge selling point of Kahua. They're the only one today that does what they do, that have that certification. So you need to create a combination of solutions that meet the certifications the same way that you have to have all your subcontractors and sub-service providers also be CMMC certified. There's a little bit of frustration because everybody's like, this is going to make everything way more expensive. There's a glass half empty, glass half full way to look at it, though. It's also now a differentiator. There's going to be a lot of companies that don't participate because they don't want to make the investment. So if you do make the investment, you are now justified in raising the cost of services because it's more expensive now to provide those services.
How much does it cost to not get a project? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, some companies are faced with a tough decision of pivoting in the marketplace. Will they just no longer do business with the government?
And from the DoD's perspective, what's the cost of a major leak of information? Saw a presentation when CMMC was rolling out last year. I saw a presentation that highlighted our latest fighter jet and how 18 months later, the Chinese had built almost the exact same fighter jet.
Yeah. So it's a lot more than dollars and cents. It's lives.
Well, Shane, we kind of understand now it's a critical regulation. It's now in effect and will progressively become enforced, and that this will, in all likelihood, wind up not just being a DoD regulation, but a federal agency regulation, and that the supply chain has to adhere to this. So tell us how we get there. I'm a contractor, I'm a supplier, I'm an interested owner. How do you start this process? What does it look like? And this is what Aprio does. I know you work on both the consulting side to help people get there, or you will be their third-party auditor if they use a different consultant. So, but what does that process look like? How do I get started?
I'll throw that, and I'll also answer the burning question of how much is it going to cost me? So, because I know everybody wants to ask that first.
It's a bargain at any price, right?
Like, it depends. You get started by, so if you hired me tomorrow and you're like, I need help with this, the process I would go through is we'd do a discovery workshop. We'd understand the nature of the business, the type of information you're coming in contact with, and then we'd start mapping out data flows, and we'd figure out whether or not it is appropriate for you to create what we call a CMMC enclave. But the nature of what that enclave looks like depends on your business. Sometimes it may be, hey, we need to stand up an entire different set of infrastructure And we may help you stand that up and operate it and running. And that's usually done in Azure. Microsoft Azure is by far and away the most popular platform, or AWS GovCloud platform. Or if you don't need that, we would help you scope business services and basically put a fence around these operations. And then from there, you would look at what is called NIST 800-171. That is the NIST framework that you can go download for free today. And there are, I think, 117, requirements. And you need to work through readiness of implementing and scoping all these requirements. Depending on the nature of softwares you're using, how you collect data, how you process it, store it, etc., those are going to apply differently to your business. So we'd help you figure out what, how, and what matters, what's in scope, and how to get the ones that do matter and are in scope implemented in place. Once you go from there, we could do a pre-assessment with you, help you get ready. And then when you feel like you're ready, you engage the CMMC certification body and you go through an actual audit. And the CMMC auditor is there to audit you against applicable requirements, audit all your documentation that has to be developed along the way, and then they in turn get ready and they are then scrutinized by what is called DFARS. I forget what that acronym is off the top of my head, but basically in CMMC, the auditor gets audited by a government agency. That's the important thing to remember. It's not just, hey, I may get a good auditor, I may get a bad one, one's easy, one's hard. There is a cop in the beat in this certification, and they are all scrutinized by a government agency. And once you pass that scrutiny, you can graduate to being certified, and then you're approved to do business.
Okay, excellent. So what I hear there, a couple things. If I'm in that supply chain, if I'm contractor, subcontractor, designer, and I haven't started this process, I'm probably behind the curve. So they need to reach out to you or someone else like Aprio. We think Aprio is a great company. They're a good partner to Kahua. But there are other agencies, and those can be found. Mike, we've posted this, I think, in the chat. There's a website called cyberab.org, and that is the clearinghouse for all the companies, the agencies like Aprio that have gone through the process to become that CMMC consultant or that third-party auditor.
Yeah.
So go to cyberab.org. Go to Shane's website. We can put our contact information here. Talk to Shane or talk to one of his peers that you find at cyberab.org. Get started. If this is in your bailiwick, get started now. If you haven't already started, get started now.
Yeah.
We've also posted some primers for people to go to take a look at, read more about this. There's a lot of information up in the chat, so check those things out. Feel free to reach out to any one of us. Mike, how else can we help the industry understand this is a big issue? It is an important regulation. It is coming like a tidal wave.
Well, you'll have case studies, basically. You'll have stories to be able to tell about how you're working with people, and we can keep telling those stories.
Happy to.
This is a good overview. So after March, let's have something where you're talking with the people who you've done this with and have them say, it was hard work, or we were doing most of it anyway. It was good for us internally to get it organized, and we did a couple extra things that got us certified, and we're so glad we did, whatever their experience is. So this is a great overview, and in the future, we'll have something that's more from the people who have gone through it.
That's a great idea. Sign me up.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Nicholas, and thank you, Shane. This has been highly informative, and we're getting thanks from the audience too. Thank you to the audience for sticking around for overtime, and we'll have this video online. I did put the complete selection of links that Nicholas prepared, so you can just copy and paste the entire body of links. And thanks to everyone, and we'll see you next week. we're going to be talking with the executive director of the Coalition for Smarter Buildings Foundation, Rick Justice. And then again, March 20th, Nicholas is going to be back with the presentation that he gave me a preview to. It is a case study on an education district that is using the project management information system approach, and it's really good. So I'm looking forward to the ALN presenting that. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye
guys.
all.
See you. Bye.